I would like to call upon Mr. Atul Batra, the CTO of Algonomy, who is going to discuss building the world class from India with Sri Vishwanath, General Partner at Coatue. Over to you, Atul, for the discussion.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. Good evening or good afternoon or good morning, everyone, wherever you are tuning in from across the globe. Well, I'm very delighted to host this fireside chat with none other than Sri Vishwanath. It's great to have you over in India virtually, Sri. Welcome to NPC.
Thank you, Atul. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. So by way of quick introduction, Sri needs no introduction, but, he joins us from the Bay Area. He's a general partner at Coatue Management, where he oversees private investments in enterprise software companies. Prior to joining Coatue, Sri served as Atlassian CTO, where he was responsible for Atlassian's very impressive cloud-native journey. And prior to Atlassian, Sri has worked in some stellar tech companies, and I'm sure we'll hear more from him on his experiences. So with that, let's get started. Sri, you've had a very interesting career journey, right from being a engineer to managing, engineering teams. And of course, our association goes back to the Sun Microsystems days, a couple of decades back. And so it's been a real privilege to see your career. And then, CTO for some of the top tech companies and now a venture capitalist. So tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You and I worked together in the good old days of Sun Microsystems. I spent 9.5 years at Sun, worked on different projects, B2B project, and then App Server. And towards the end, I ran the Glassfish App Server group, J2E group. And that was an amazing experience. I grew from being an individual contributor to becoming a lead and then becoming a manager. And somebody said, oh, you need to have an MBA. So I also did an MBA on the side, which we can talk about the learnings from that. And then once I got to a point where, especially when you're living in the Bay Area, you want to either start a company or go do startups. So I went and joined a startup, Ning, and that was a social networking startup. Social networking was hyped at that point, but it was an amazing 4 years being in a startup, right? So being in a startup just compresses your learning, and 4 years was being like 10 years of learning in other places. And we ended up selling the company after we scaled the company from literally when I joined few people to 200 people, and we went through changes and everything. So I learned a lot about how do you scale and work in a startup and build something that's a platformy like and lead from the front and things like that. Then I went to VMware for a short period. Then I was at Groupon as CTO, where I ran product and engineering and design. Groupon was an international company with 48 countries and lots of complexities. And after Groupon, then I went to Atlassian. And when I started at Atlassian 6.5 years, 7 years ago, Atlassian was, at least my org was about few hundred people. And when I left few months ago, my org was 6,000 people. So amazing kind of growth and lots of interesting things and building out a platform and the cloud journey. And I was also on several boards like SendGrid and Splunk. So lots of good experience from all these places. And at some point last year, I decided I want to use all this and help startups gain momentum and work with founders. And that's been amazing for the last 3 months. I've primarily focused on deep tech space and AI, right? That has been my focus.
Okay, fantastic. That's a great journey, and I'm sure it continues. And if I may ask, through all of that, what are your biggest learnings? And you talked about that briefly, across leadership, technology, that could be useful for our audience.
When I became a manager, I guess I had no plans to becoming a manager. And there are lots of things that I learned by looking at other people and just learning from scenarios that I was put in. And one of the things that I learned was, as a leader, you need to lead from the front, right? And culture is not just that it happens to you. You can actually set your culture. I'll tell you a story. This was back in 1999 when Star Wars Phantom Menace was released. And it was a huge hype, and we had planned to go there on the Friday, and we had seen all the previous 3 episodes in the series. and we were a team of 6 people, including the manager. And the manager was somewhere else, and 2 people went out to get the tickets, and we all drove over. One of the team members said, "Oh, I have lots of work to do. I have to wrap up, so I can't come." So we went in and said, "Oh, that person is not coming." So we bought 5 tickets. And the manager came in and said, "Oh, why is that person not here?" And he's like, no, we need to bring that person in. So he drove back to the office and brought that person, but we only had 5 tickets. So he sat outside while we watched like the most sensational movie of the year, or maybe for the decade. I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan, but Darth Maul got halved, and Qui-Gon got killed, and it's like a fantastic movie. But it struck me saying, my manager is sitting outside, missing the movie while we were all enjoying inside. And I just couldn't see how I would do that if I were in that scenario. And then it struck me saying, look, the team is together, right? If one person is working somewhere because they have load, the whole team needs to pull the load, not just one person. And we need to care for the whole team. That concept of teamwork was, and my manager doing that, I was like, oh, wow, I need to be a better manager from day one, right? So that's the ground first principles. So it started from that journey. And then as I started leading larger teams, I also realized that diversity matters, right? One thing that at least I didn't appreciate growing up was about diversity. It's like, yeah, everybody was like me, and I grew up in Bangalore. But then once I started managing people and figured out, I guess, how teams work, it's actually the complementary skills and experience. And in fact, I've seen over and over in the last 20 plus years that I've led teams, that having a woman on the team, like if it's a 10% team, it actually makes the team stronger, not just saying it because we need to have diversity. So I've come to appreciate or internalize the quality of diversity and how much it actually improves innovation for the company. So that's something that I'm bullish on. I have several list of things, but those 2 stands out of all the things.
In terms of technology, you've seen a lot of technology, like any particular theme that stayed with you?
Yeah, so one of the things while leading technology teams, it's important to empower teams to be able to do bottoms up innovation across the company. So as a CTO, as a head of product or head of design, it's not your job to decide what technology needs to be done. Your job is to put guardrails and figure out there's consistency in the org, but let the teams choose what they want to choose. I think that balance was important. And setting up, for example, when I started at Atlassian, we had to make some hard choices, right? So we had to figure out whether we ran abstraction in multiple clouds and have Kubernetes and things like that. And I made a choice to go native on AWS and move to microservices architecture. So those are the kinds of things where microservices architecture actually helped us scale, because you could break it down into smaller chunks and have each team own specific pieces with APIs that are somewhat isolated, and we could move different projects to different areas. And I didn't mention this, the common theme for me for the last several companies is I've always had an India team, right? In fact, I've started India teams at Groupon and at Atlassian and grew the teams. So that has been, and having these microservices actually enabled to grow a very distributed org.
Fantastic. So leading from the front, leading by empathy, leading by diversity, empowering teams, all fantastic things. Sri, switching tracks, we here in India, we talk a lot about this theme called world class from India, which is the larger sort of tagline of NPC. What is your view on what would constitute world class for our ecosystem here, and how do we strive to get there?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. In fact, I am actually very bullish on the Indian ecosystem, and I'm getting more bullish as I see the trend in India. When I was growing up, like all my friends, we all wanted to work in big companies because my parents said you have to work in big companies, and that was the trend. These days, people want to work in startups. People want to innovate, right? Which is a huge boon for India. And the second thing is there is high talent and the density of talent to build large organizations. So I'm so looking forward to seeing the next Google, next Tesla coming out of the Indian ecosystem. If I look to, I guess, what is the primary thing that I guess the leaders or the product leaders who are leading a specific product or the company need to think through is to shift from this consulting mindset to the product mindset, right? Consulting mindset is like prevalent because we have lots of Indian consulting firms. And that's a very different philosophy of you get a list of things to do, you do those, you throw it over the wall and you're done and you move on to the next one. Whereas as a product mindset, you live it, right? So you actually internalize what you need to do and you set up a system that can achieve that mission. I call it the CI/CD pipeline, not the CI/CD that engineers work on. Like we need that too, but this is the continuous improvement and consistent delivery, right? Which is what is needed, right? So what you need is to have a big mission and to have a mechanism to improve the product, improve the company, and to be able to consistently deliver towards that, which can help you to focus on small set of steps and keep improving towards a much larger, bigger goal. And if I break it down, I guess, into smaller companies, I would encourage the smaller companies, the founders who are starting companies, to think bigger, like, because you can do it, and then break it down into smaller chunks and see how you can achieve it, and not just be, yeah, I'll just copy, make it cheaper for what exists. India definitely has the cost advantage, but that's not enough in the longer term, right? So being innovative is extremely important. Yeah. And for larger companies, there is a list of things that makes it world-class in terms of how do you make decisions? How do you make, if I summarize everything, how do you create an adaptive org that can help you to achieve the goals? Because change is not just constant, but change is accelerating, right, in this technology world. So because change is accelerating, you need to create a system that can adapt to changes, right, which is more important than just doing it once.
Fantastic. So product thinking versus, services or consulting mindset, long-term vision, and then, empowering your teams and so on. Fantastic. Sri, today, speaking of that, we are the third largest ecosystem in India, in terms of startups, by volume. And but now the focus is on quality, right? Not just quantity. Yeah. So how should entrepreneurs and overall product folks in India, a lot of them in large companies, as you mentioned, how should they think about being comparable with their global peers, including the US? And what insights can you share that they can make actionable in terms of building a world-class product and selling a world-class product, right? Both are equally important. And I think there's a lot of lessons from Atlassian, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, in startups, generally the founder, the CEO, is the quality bar for the company, right? So they can veto things and they can say, no, that's not good enough. So as a founder, you can do that, and you should do that in terms of making sure that the quality bar is high. Whereas once you get to a larger company, or if you are a center of excellence for a larger company, you can have one person mandating things. So you need to set up a system that can make sure that you can achieve this quality level consistently across different teams that you have. Right? So that's the high level point. I think that's important to realize that just having you as a product leader, having a quality bar is not important. You need to have everybody in the company to be able to work through the system to be able to hit that bar. And one of the things in this continuous learning mindset is many a times you don't hit that bar, and you need to be able to do retrospectives and learn from those and continuously improve. And it's important to have this blameless culture, right? If you start pointing towards, oh, you've created this fault, then people just retract back and they don't try to fix things. So I keep saying the fault is not the person, but it's actually the system, right? So as leaders, you should think about how do you set up a system so that when these faults happen, you can correct it and you can keep improving and not just go back into a downward spiral, right? So that part is important. The other thing that I learned, especially in the startup that I did back in the day, is more is actually less in many cases. And we get into this mindset of, oh, we have a product, let's add one more feature, let's add another feature, let's add another feature. And then it becomes a hodgepodge of feature set, which reduces the usability for customers. So trying to step back and have this mindset of what do customers want and how do you make sure that they have clean onboarding into those, and keeping the product simple and the simplicity aspect extremely important. The way to get that simplicity is to have customer empathy, right? So generally, product managers are close to customers and their job is to talk to customers. So that's the easier part. But the harder part is to have the rest of the team, because the product managers work with engineers and designers, to have the rest of the team also feel like they're close to customers. Because I call this as bullwhip effect. So when you have a whip, the range goes higher. So as you go farther away from customers, the error bar goes longer. So you want engineers who are working on a feature to be pretty close to customer requirements than not just the product managers, so that having that feedback loop to customers is extremely important. At Atlassian, we did something not same as other enterprise companies. So Atlassian is roughly a $3 billion company, enterprise, multiple products, but doesn't have a large sales organization. And it's driven by this self-service PLG motion. And for the PLG motion to work, the product needs to be self-serviced by people, right? They should love to work with the product and tell their friends saying, oh, you should use Jira, you should use Confluence, and not just that some salesperson pounds on the table, gives them discount and sells something to a company that doesn't want to use it. So to be able to build that PLG motion, it actually takes a lot of effort and focus to be able to deliver on the features and the constant feedback from customers to be able to keep improving it. And one of the things that I encourage all the founders to do is to figure out how to also, you may have to do enterprise sales motion, whether it's from day one or when you get to some milestone. When you are doing that, having PLG motion actually helps you to be a lot more efficient with the enterprise motion. Right, so figure out how you can have that flywheel in place, and there are lots of learnings there on how to do it and how not to do it. So that's a big learning in terms of make the product really, really good so that people use it, they love it, and then it spreads virally, and not just be selling it from top down.
Yeah, the viral thing is amazing. In fact, I think at some point, Atlassian literally had 0 salespeople, right? So that's remarkable. Sri, switching to sort of SaaS, any specific advice for SaaS entrepreneurs from India? I mean, SaaS is the big rocket ship, globally, but in our ecosystem in particular, any words of wisdom there?
Yeah, so SaaS has this quality where, because it's online, you can actually see what users are doing. So you can learn a lot. So investing in metrics, extremely important. Understanding the metrics and usage patterns of users, extremely important. That's how you can build the product-led motion. And we had this concept of land and expand, where because Atlassian was a multiple product company, so users would land in one of these products. And then we built these bridges between products on moving people from one product to the other. That's the expand motion. Between one product to the other, going from one edition to the higher edition, having them use APIs. So we have different dimensions of these product-led motion growth. Those are the different things that the SaaS leaders should focus on. And the other thing that's also extremely important is figure out how you can build a platform, right? Platforms are powerful if you can build it. And building a platform requires longer-term thinking, right? Because when you build an API, revenue doesn't come in. You are compromising some revenue for building something for the long term. And that's a mindset you need to have, saying, okay, I'm going to build a platform that exposes API, that allows other people to build something in my ecosystem and build that ecosystem. That takes much longer, but it's a lot stickier once you build it.
Got it.
So the big advice is, depending on the product that you have and depending on which layer of the stack, figure out if you can build an ecosystem, not just a product that you're building.
Got it. So building the product sort of for cross-sell, upsell, and then platform thinking and investing long-term. Fantastic.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Sri, you've also had a lot of experience, as you mentioned, building centers in India. You started one at Atlassian a couple of years back, and you've done that multiple times in your life and career. Any mini playbook for folks tuned in that are running, GCCs, and there's only about 1,500 plus in India. I think that was the last count I'm aware of, and growing at a very exponential pace, and probably the largest R&D presence outside the US, as you may know. So any wisdom there?
Yeah, no, I am a big proponent of having an India center because I started one in Groupon, grew the team, and started one in Atlassian. Atlassian team grew from starting the team to 1,000 people in less than 3 years.
Wow.
And we did a number of things, and I'll talk through some of those. But it was intense. As a company was scaling across the board and we were launching products, we had to do a number of things to be able to scale at that pace. The best thing that I did to start with was to hire an amazing site leader, right? So Dinesh did an amazing job just coming in and helping all the things that needs to happen in terms of to be able to set up. Going from 0 to 20 people is actually really, really hard, right? And then once you set up the basic engine in place, there's also lots of other hurdles, but at least you have something that you can start scaling and fixing.
Right.
To be able to start, having support from the executive leadership is extremely important, right? You need not just one person, but multiple people to lean in. And for us, what happened was when we started leaning in, like engineering grew really fast. Like we hired actually design pretty quickly, and product took much longer to hire. And the consequence was that we could do lots of back-end projects, but something that touches the customer, it took us much longer to be able to make it fully self-sustained. But what we did was we had this philosophy where we needed every site to be equal, right? So not just that India was special. India was not special. India was just like any other site. And it had to have fully owned products, like not augmentation to other teams, not having as many dependencies. So when we started the center, we moved a specific projects from US into India. And in fact, moved the people off in the US from that project and moved that project to India. Not just the project, but we also had some people stay in India for a year that were in the company for a long time. That helped us to get the culture and the process just bootstrapped from ground zero, because that's important to have. Because all the things about, I guess, the culture that you have, if you create two separate islands, it causes very different things, right? It's important to have that communication between the Indian center and the rest of the company be as smooth as be between any other sites.
Got it. And I know we're running out of time, but I want to squeeze in a few more questions. Sri, now you're a VC, and I know you're very bullish on AI. You've made several investments there in your short time. Any sort of trends that you want to call out? Any kind of companies, products that will have massive impact? Anything for India to think about?
Yeah. It's been 3 months as a VC, and I've done 4 investments, all in AI. So I'm extremely bullish. So I'll make some bold statements. In fact, I've toned it down. I'm even more bullish than what I'm going to say. So if you take a longer horizon, let's say 8 to 10 years horizon, every company will be an AI company, right? So if not, that company is dead or a zombie. Second is every developer will be an AI developer. Every developer will be augmented by AI. So more than 50% of code will be written by AI, not by the developer. They would choose it, but it would be written by the AI itself. AI would be better than humans in most fields, right? And AI will have common sense. I'm not saying AGI, which is a specific connotation of what it means, but it'll have common sense. But all this is actually good for humanity, because what it does is it unleashes creativity for humans so that you can do more creative work and less chores, right? Yeah. And chores are all taken off by AI. So I'm actually very bullish. I'd love to see more world-class AI from India and AI companies and at all layers of the stack. I'm happy to talk to anybody who is keen on that.
Fantastic. We'd love to engage you. Sri, so a final question. What is your parting advice to product people in India from Silicon Valley?
Yeah. So the one thing that I would say is have a long-term thinking mindset. That I think would change the perspective of, if you're thinking 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, it's different from what can I do for next 5 years to change the whole landscape in a specific sector in humanity, like helping out, like then it gets you a much bigger vision, gives you focus on what can be done, and then you can break it down into smaller chunks. So I would absolutely encourage longer term thinking.
Fantastic. And I'm getting the buzzer here, but well, those were excellent insights, inspiring and great fun to learn about your journey, Sri, and your views on India in particular. We're very gratified to hear all of that. Really enjoyed the chat. Thank you very much, and hope to see you in India in person soon.
Next time. Absolutely. All right, Atul.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Atul and Sri, for that wonderful, wonderful discussion.